Welcome to the Greg Bennett Show. I'm your joint host today with Chris McCormack. Today's episode, I'm both a host and the guest. Chris, aka Macca, hosts this episode and asks me questions about the podcast, and then we discuss my journey and process in the triathlon world. And I discuss some of the highlights of the episodes of year one, and discuss who I'd love to have on the show in the future and where I'd like this show to go. And then we move on to sort of really looking at my career a little bit, my journey into the sport and finding my strengths and when did I take control of my career and my life. And Chris and I discuss the fundamentals of high performance sport together, and we share many stories throughout this episode. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Some housekeeping before we go on. Please share the show on your social pages if you get the chance. That would just really help me grow the show. If you have any questions or suggestions, please feel free to contact me on probably Instagram. Message is the best way to do it, and you can find me there at the Greg Bennett Show. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this one. Thanks for listening. Remember, success comes to those who endure just one moment longer. I'm so grateful for the continued support of the show from these incredible sponsors. You really do need to have these products in your life. Personally, I use each of them daily. Athletic Greens nutritional beverage, Hyperice recovery tools, and the glutathione supplement Continual G. What I love about Athletic Greens is its simplicity. It's delivered straight to your door and it takes seconds to mix with water. It tastes great and goes down easy. And I know I'm getting the most comprehensive nutritional beverage on the planet in one quick drink. If you're looking for one product that has as much high quality nutrients in it as possible, then you want to consider Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens is more than just a multivitamin and multimineral. It takes it to the next level, adding a daily dose of superfoods, probiotics, greens blend, and more to support the gut health, energy, immunity, and stress. And right now, Athletic Greens is giving you, my audience, a special offer on top of their all-in-one formula. You'll receive 1 year supply of vitamin D and 5 travel packs for free with your first purchase for additional immune support. Many of the population are vitamin D deficient, including myself. I focus heavily in getting in the sun throughout the day, but when I can't, I religiously supplement with vitamin D. Adding vitamin D to your daily routine is just a great way to support vitamin D production. So if you're looking to get more out of your multivitamin and invest in your immunity, energy, and gut health, then you'll struggle to find anything more comprehensive than Athletic Greens. Take ownership of your health today and receive comprehensive nutritional insurance, a free year supply of vitamin D, and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase by visiting athleticgreens.com/Greg. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Greg. Now, you'll hear me mention Normatec and Hypervolt from Hyperice in several of the conversations with my guests in this show. Many of my guests and I are using these recovery tools religiously. You really must have them in your house. Sit in a pair of Normatec boots at the end of a long day. Use the Hypervolt percussion massage device to warm up muscles and loosen hot spots before working out or anytime you have a niggling injury. They're just so easy and they're so quick and they work. Their vibrating foam rollers, thermal technology, and Normatec compression systems just help you warm up faster, recover quicker, and simply move better. Seriously, these products are the perfect Christmas gift for any family member or good friend. Get $50 off all percussion devices now, no code needed, and get an additional 10% off with code GREG10 at hyperice.com. That's hyperice.com, HYPERICE.com, and use code GREG10 for 10% off. I have a web address for all of my listeners who already know that 1, the human body makes the most powerful antioxidants on earth. 2, the master antioxidant your body cells make is called glutathione, and the human body needs glutathione to live. 3, the reason I'm addressing a select group of listeners with this web address is that once you see what these scientists in my hometown, Sydney, have accomplished, it'll blow your mind. Go check out continualg.com, continualg.com. That's CONTINUALG.com. Check it out and let them know that I told you about it. All right. Well, It's been 1 year of the Greg Bennett Show, formerly Be With Champions, and I've had the privilege to have the world's most wonderful conversations with some of the world's greatest athletes and coaches, doctors, entertainers, and entrepreneurs. And it blows my mind that these incredible people have been just so willing to come on the show and have a chat. And some of them I've known, but many I've only come to know from these conversations. And I'm just so tremendously grateful for all of them for coming on and for you for listening and supporting the show. So today's episode's a little different. I'll be joined with a guest host. In fact, I'll let him ask some of the questions. A good mate of mine, former professional athlete, multiple world champion, now businessman, entrepreneur, Chris McCormack. Chris, like me, is passionate about all sports and high performance. He's the CEO of the Manor Sports and Entertainment Group, co-founder of the Superleague Triathlon series, the president of Bahrain 13 endurance team. He was on episode 8 of the show, and an episode you really should go check out. But today, we'll discuss this podcast. We're going to review the year and many of the episodes, and then, due to several requests, we'll look at my journey and process into the world of endurance sports and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So, without further ado, welcome. Thanks for joining me on the Greg Bennett Show. Once again, Chris McCormack. How are you, mate?
Good, Greg. How are you?
Yeah, good, mate. It's early in Australia, isn't it, for you? Did you get up early on, it's a couple of days post-Christmas?
Yeah, it's about time I started getting up early. That whole Christmas rush, the late nights, too many champagnes, but it was a great time. As you know, Sydney's beautiful this time of year, and we've done a pretty good job with handling all the pandemic that's happened in 2020. So we had a few freedoms this year, which is wonderful.
Yeah. Did you have much family in town?
We had, all the families. My wife's side's come up from Adelaide, so they were all here. My brothers and my father were here. So it was a really nice Christmas. Really, really good indeed.
Brilliant. Well, I had several people sort of mention throughout the year that, hey, Greg, I'll come on the show and interview you. I'll let's do that kind of thing. And then I was thinking about it. Well, who's the one person that I've kind of almost since the very beginning, I think you started maybe a couple of years after me, but really we kind of journeyed through the world of endurance sport almost at the same time. We kind of went different directions. Maybe after 2000 Olympics, you tended to go long and I stayed short, but really we've kind of had careers that kind of ran in a similar direction. And I think the one thing I thought about when it was like, okay, I'll have Chris sort of do this kind of a style of interview was your love for sport and your love for high performance. And I know you and I have often roomed at races and we've chatted all things sport and we've tried to get in each other's head before races and all sorts of things. And I think when I thought about it, I was like, there's probably no better guy to have a bit of a laugh with and look at the journey and what we went through over this last 30 years than you. So I really appreciate you coming on and being prepared to ask me a few questions and just chat about the show a little bit.
Yeah, well, I've been listening to the show. I was like guest number 8. Far out.
Well, it was funny. When I started the show, we had a little baby coming on January 14 of 2020. And I told Laura, I'm going to start this podcast. And I was like, well, I need to start it sort of, I think I started, the first episode came out January 5th. And then I read, well, you're meant to start the show with 3 episodes. You got to launch with 3. So I was like, okay. So all through November, December, I was like, interviewing so many people, trying to make sure the episodes weren't outdated, but the amount of people are like, oh, Christmas is coming up. And I'm like, no, shut up, because it's going to be coming out later. But I had to jam in. I think I did 11 episodes before our little Archer was born on January 14. So then that gave me the freedom to get through sort of January, February. So when I interviewed you, I think it was probably like that mid-December last year.
Yeah.
And you were kind of brought out in that kind of, I rolled them out over that kind of a 10-week period. So it was a while ago, though, that we chatted.
Far out. Number 10. You've had everyone on because I listened after that. I remember doing the episode with you. I was in Thailand and it took us 2 takes to take it, if you remember. We had a breakdown the internet, but it was – you've had –
mate. So many breakdowns. Many breakdowns. You have no idea.
It reminded me of my Ironman career, breaking down the middle.
Oh, yeah.
But what have been the favourite shows for you? You've interviewed everyone. I remember listening to Javier. That was a ripper show when you did Javier.
Well, look, honestly, I it's very hard to pick a favourite because I feel like every single one of them I've walked away going, wow. Whether it's obviously yourself and Crowe been very good mates, through my whole life, and just and Whitfield and just guys that just good mates to have a chat with,
Yeah.
or then bringing on like a Mark Allen or a Dave Scott, who are like my childhood heroes that I'm sitting down and they're just letting out and telling me everything there is to know. Mark Allen was all about quietening the mind and actually, this is something I wanted to share with you. I love Mark Allen was all about love and the power of love and how much energy you got from love. And I don't know if you remember, you were talking about you were fueled a little bit with hate, and it was kind of like, where do we get our fuel from to be successful, to become the best in the world at what we do? And I think you guys were a week apart. That's what I loved about that. One week we're talking about love, next one we're talking about being fueled with hate. And so that was fascinating. I think Hamish Carter surprised me a lot. Hamish has been a friend of mine for a long, long time, and we really dived deep into his sort of Olympic campaign and how awful 2000 was, where he was meant to be one of the favorites, along with you and I that were left out, whatever. But
Hamish was amazing at that period of time. But you and I, without you and I in the race, he should have won. Well, I'm glad. Butthead won, Simon, but Hamish in that period of time, how remarkable was he? He was such a big performer.
He was never off the podium ever. And like that 10 years leading up to that race, and he had a shocker. I don't know where he came, 30th or something, but he talked about having to change as a person rather than an athlete. And that one I left going, I don't know, it just was a lot deeper than I'd given Hamish credit for, if you must admit. It was kind of like he said, look, I left 2000 Olympics going, Simon Whitfield didn't deserve that Olympics. I deserved it, kind of thing. I deserved a medal or whatever. And it's because of what he'd done previous. He's like, whoa. The person that deserves that Olympic gold medal is the one that earned it. Yeah. You don't get it just because you have something before. And he said he had to really change as a person. And so that episode I really enjoyed. And then I enjoyed reaching out to different people too, and not knowing what reaction I was going to get, if they were going to say yes or no to coming on the show. And Johnny Brownlee was really fun just a few months ago. I said to him, Johnny, what would have to happen for you to come on my show? Because I'm always a lot of these guys get a lot of requests, as I'm sure you do. And so anytime they say yes to coming on, I'm always, I feel pretty good about myself. I must admit, it feels pretty nice. And Johnny didn't just say yes. He was like, Greg, I've been listening to all your shows. Oh, what a treat. I can't believe it. I was like, hang on, you're Johnny Brownlee. You realize I'm the one that's meant to be starstruck, mate. That was kind of epic to have just the new generation actually wanting to be on this show. And obviously you're good mates now with Vincent Lewis, right? I mean, he's in Phoenix and the Bahrain team, and I don't know, he's a young Macca. I even told him that the other day in Daytona.
He's way better looking than me.
Oh, he's way better looking. I wasn't going to say that.
Way better looking.
But he has the charisma. He has the passion. He's obviously incredibly talented and athletic and is working hard. But his story of, back up against the wall, that he borrowed his money from his dad and said, look, rather than go to university, just give me a chance to do this sport. And he said, if I didn't make it, I was at the factory with my dad or working at the local bike shop. That was it. Yep. And I loved that story. So yeah, look, I could go on and on. There's actually every single episode, there's something I took away, not just from going, I like that person, that was an interesting story, but there was always just this little bit. And that's kind of why I started the show. It was like this, wanting to get a little bit more out of truly some of the world's best high performers. I think Hunter Kemper was great.
That was a good one. I listened to that one. Very good.
Yeah. I thought he was very good at talking about process goals versus outcome goals and that. Yeah. I think the quote of the whole quote of the year has to be Emma Fredino, formerly Emma Snowsill, when I asked what's Jan like at home and does he help out around the house? Jan Fredino, the number one sort of guy in the world right now, and she's like, he's like a teenager. He knows what to do, but he doesn't do it. And I thought, ouch! But it was that was pretty funny.
I only use that myself. I've actually used that with my teenagers. You're like a teenager.
Yeah, you actually are a teenager. Yeah. But I think when I look at the year though, is I think there wasn't a guest that didn't talk about being consistent.
Yeah.
And that was the big takeaway for the year. Is one thing, you got to have that passion there, but just keep turning up. And that was what was extraordinary. And I think but it was really, it's been ingrained every single person. There's no magic workout. There's no magic anything. It's just stay consistent.
Yeah. You've literally had everyone though on the show. Who you have? Like every time I see it you pop up on Twitter and you're like, oh, I'll listen to this one. I'll listen to this one.
There's just so many incredible people that I've had on the show. I mean, I've mentioned a small handful, but honestly, it's not just the world's greatest triathletes that I've had on. I've had, the world's greatest coaches, Joel Filiol and Dan Lorang were just absolutely amazing. Cliff English, Brett Sutton, Lance Watson, and Cyril Lindley, all of them just so much knowledge and so willing to share it with all of us. It was just absolutely, every one of those episodes, I was like, wow. And then I've had some of the most incredible doctors come on. Dr. Tommy Wood has now been on twice. And every time I leave the conversation with Tommy, I'm like, this guy's just so incredible. He can take such complex things and dumb it down for me that I truly, truly love those conversations with Tommy. And I think I'm going to have him back on as a regular. He's just so brilliant. Other doctors I've had, Dr. Ara Sapaya, his journey and his story was just, forget the science and everything else we talk about, just his journey to get to where he was, to me, was just a fascinating episode. And, then Dr. Mansour, when I had him on and he was reading out my, my DNA and my genetics, just another brilliant man, just absolutely brilliant. And I felt a little vulnerable with that episode when, he's coming on and reading my genetics and everything, but it was a fantastic one. Dr. Luke Bennett, no relation, but it is a good mate of mine. He was fantastic talking about the world of Formula One and, the traveling circus basically of Formula One and how they're able to sustain what they do year in, year out. And, and then the other sports, having someone like Nino Schurter come on, 8-time world champion, bronze, silver, and Olympic gold medalist. We've never met before, but he took the time out to come on the show. Kate Courtney, Mark Webber, Formula One, just incredible athletes that are doing incredible things in other sports. And then some of the entertainers, Rich Roll, Dan McPherson, and then Phil Liggett. Phil Liggett was a real highlight for me as well. I'm a bit starstruck with Phil Liggett, the famous commentator. So very, very blessed. I feel tremendous gratitude to all of them. I haven't, mentioned all their names here, but it's just been an incredible year.
Who are you chasing? Who is there left again?
There's everybody. It's like I say this to Laura all the time. Look, the low-hanging fruit and my real passion, obviously, is triathlon and endurance sport. And reaching out to you mates and you guys has been easier. There's a few that have not got back to me. A number of the women that I'm still hoping will feel comfortable to talk about themselves. I feel like the guys are always very willing to talk about themselves. With the women, sorry, they take a little bit more coercing. Even Laura, I tried to get my own wife on the show. I was like, come on. I mean, in fairness, she was breastfeeding it, 6 months old. But I have felt getting the women on has been a bit harder. I've really enjoyed the conversations that I've had with them. Whether the triathletes, Gwen Jorgensen, obviously, Katie Safaris, and but even like Kate Courtney, the world champion mountain biker, blown away by her. Just I don't know, she's in her young 20s there, and just somebody that really has it together. Stanford grad. Just people. Yeah, some people blow you away with their intellect and their athleticism, and she was one I hung up going, wow. Whatever she wants to do,
she's going to do it.
She's going to do it. Yeah. But we're talking about who I'd like to have. Look, I want to see this show grow to the point where, I'm having Roger Federer on one weekend and, Chris Hemsworth the next and, Hugh Jackman and Tom Brady. These are all the guys, I've actually reached out to them all. I have reached out to Tom Brady, Mark Wahlberg, Chris Hemsworth, Hugh Jackman, and trying to see if I can get them on the show. The tennis players, I started playing tennis 2 years ago, so I'm kind of become a bit of a tennis groupie.
Yeah.
But I honestly, and this is a debate we could have right now, I actually feel like the tennis players are arguably the greatest athletes in the world. And the reason I say that is not just from the physical side. I think physically they're incredibly gifted athletes. They know how to move. They're agile. They have the endurance because they play for 3 to 5 hours. And their coordination is just unbelievable. But the fact that they have to restart a point every kind of 30 seconds to a minute. You know how when the gun goes off in a triathlon, we dive in and boom, you're nervous, but then the gun goes and then you're like, oh yeah, I remember how to do this. And it goes. Tennis, it's a bit like golf. You have to replay a point every single time. Yeah. But golf, I don't put in the same list because they're not quite as athletic as the tennis players. So,
and there goes the show, Benno. There goes the show.
Nobody's listening now.
Yeah,
hung up. And so, I'd love to get those three on. And as I mentioned, Tom Brady, I think, one of the greatest ever sort of NFL football players. But I also love his family, his relationship with his whole family. It just seems like a guy that I'd like to have a conversation with. But honestly, then you think, okay, entrepreneurs and all of this, yourself and Jamie Hunt, Jamie Hunt, who started 2 Times You and did incredibly well out of that clothing brand, and yourself with the businesses you've had. I love the entrepreneur mindset too. I love that. And so you think, okay, we'll start at the top. Okay, Elon Musk, how do I get him on the show? This is what I want the show to grow to. I don't think I ever want to leave triathlon. I want to keep that as the real substance of what the show is, but I want to keep sprinkling these entertainers and entrepreneurs throughout. Yeah, if I can, it'd be awesome.
Talking who's your favorite tennis player? Now you're a tennis player. Who's your guy? Because I love this conversation with tennis because I'm a mad tennis fan, huge tennis fan. You're going to say Roger, aren't you? You're a Roger.
No, I'm not. I really like Djokovic.
Good, interesting.
Yeah, Roger has the ability to serve at 120 km an hour, whereas the other guys are hitting 150. Now it's off the chart type power, but he's all finesse, and I love watching that finesse. But I don't know, there's something about Djokovic, the way he slides on a clay court and he can do the splits. I just think it's incredible. I think Nadal's probably the nicest guy. He reminds me of Javier Gomez and Mario Mola. They're just they're really, really genuinely nice guys.
Yeah.
And just a weapon. Look, I think you could debate it all day. Who's your favorite? Because they've all got something that you love about them. Like Federer has gone on just extraordinary. I love that he's able to be as old as he is and doing what he is.
Yeah, I agree. And he's just all style. I'm not a big double-handed backhander like Nadal. I love Nadal, but I was a Federer fan, and Nadal earned my love by just being the athlete he is.
And you've met him, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean,
you had your race.
Yeah, totally. We had I was always, just picking a side as a tennis fan. I was always barracking for Federer, and I used to just sit there going, "Jesus, Nadal's good," and and just by his sheer talent, he won my. I said, I can't dislike this guy. He's just amazing, he's a freak. And then Jocko came along, and what he's done in such a short period of time, when you've got the 2 greatest players of all time, in that era he's playing, and he's had to take them out to win the amount of time. I think he's 17 wins now, 17 slams.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, because you got to think Roger and that won a lot of those early slams against, I guess I'm saying the lesser athletes. They're not by any means, but there was the Leighton Hewitts and these sort of athletes that he was beating, where Nadal has beat or Djokovic has had to take out Roger and Nadal on his journey
every time,
right? So we've been so blessed in tennis. So I do agree.
Do you play? We're going to have a match.
I hit the ball. I don't say I play. My wife and I play twice a week, but just a little comp we have with our friends.
We're the same. That's the one thing I can do with Laura. We have, even if we have 45 minutes while the 2 kids are napping, we can run up to the tennis court, hit the ball, and come home. It's a really good one to just be able to go come back, Yeah,
once you start getting those rallies going, and you don't try and when I first started, I tried to slam the ball and win every shot, and it ruined the game. But now we've got a nice rally going. And I love it. I enjoy it.
We'll have to have a game when I can get back to Australia when you guys open up and let us come back.
I'm trying to get out. I'm trying to.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'm trying to get my mum to come out. That I'd love to get her over to the States for a little bit, but then they're not too keen on letting citizens leave at the moment. Yeah, where are you trying to get to? Are you trying to get it back to London, or where are you off to?
Back to Asia and to London, but it won't happen till say March or April. So,
yeah, it's not happening for a bit. Yeah. So apart from those guys, I think, look, and then there's a whole bunch. I'd love to have Pat Rafter and Leighton Hewitt on, obviously all the Australians. There's so many amazing Australians. That's home. It was great having Kai Hurst on the show the other day. He's just just one of the great athletes of the world.
Pure athlete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pure.
Great.
Do you remember doing it? Were you with us when we were sponsored by Rival in 97, 98?
Yep.
I don't know. And Steve Philpott from Rival, he said, and we had to do this photo shoot. Were you with us in that photo shoot where Kai Hurst, this young, he was like 15 or something, and you and I were probably 25, 26. And it was like, who's this young punk? Come along. And he just qualified for the Uncle Toby's Super Series, or was it Neutral Grain back then? Uncle Toby's, I think.
Yeah.
And were you in that photo shoot? I don't remember.
Probably. I remember heaps of them with Kai. So.
Yeah.
Watching that kid go from a like you said, a young schoolboy to just dominate. I'd never seen a swimmer like it come through that surf lifesaving. Now to see him in sailing, what he's doing in sailing, he's a remarkable.
I know. You hear he said his lung capacity is 10.2 liters. Just so you understand, because I don't know if you know that, but the average man is somewhere between 6 and 7 liters. Now, it all has to do with the size of the man, but Kai's not that big to have a 10.2 liter lungs. It's really just not fair.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. Anyway. But hopefully I'm trying with this show to, it's been really year one has been just kind of learning the ropes, how to have conversations. For me, learning all the technical side, as I mentioned to you earlier, there's been probably at least half the episodes I've had people drop out or, had to figure people turning up late, rescheduling. It's just been, it's a constant. But it's been a real learning curve for me because I'm not a techie person. And it was like, okay, just learn as much as you can. I did realize pretty early on, though, that I wanted good audio. So I do send that off to a company called Resonant Recordings to do all the editing and help me with all of that because I do most of the post-production stuff, but with the audio editing, I really want it to be done well. So I do send that off to be done in person, done well. But ideally with the show, I want to get to the point where it's in person. Obviously with COVID in 2020, that was never going to happen. But I didn't really want to do it year one anyway. I wanted to kind of learn the craft by just doing it, over computer to computer. But ideally, I want to take the show to where it's in person, and then ideally if I can get some big enough sponsors, if I can get enough downloads and the sponsors get bigger, I really want to start it to be more like a day in the life of type series where I'll come to Sydney, you and I might go for a run and a swim, have a tennis match, and then sit down and we'll have a glass of wine and we'll record the conversation. That is kind of the day in the life of is where I really want to take this show and just line up. And you may not do an episode every week like that.
Yes.
But if you could do 10 really great episodes for the year where you do a full, and that's when I'd go to, YouTube and it'd be more video and everything else. That's my dream. That's my dream.
Rich Roll does that sort of now, doesn't he? That's if you listen to the Rich Roll podcast.
Yeah.
He gets picked.
Rich is doing, he just built a whole new studio and everything. He's doing exceptionally well. And that was a real treat when I reached out to him and said, do you want to come on my show? And he said, yeah. I was like,
he's a
wow.
triathlon. He's my old training partner in LA. I remember when he started that podcast, I didn't even know what a podcast was. I'm like, what? That's how long Rich has been doing podcasts. He's like, do you want to come on my podcast? I'm like, what's a podcast, mate? I've never heard of one.
Well, that was what he told me. I said to him, how did you kind of build yours to the point that you're getting several 100,000 downloads per episode? And he said, actually, Greg, I started when podcasts weren't really a thing. People were but he said, I'd done about 50 episodes. So he must have done about a year's worth. And then he said, and this, you'll like this is blowing smoke up your butt a bit, but he said, and then Chris McCormack came on and I got 10,000 downloads on one episode. And he said, I couldn't believe it. But he said that was you were actually a part of his, ignition to really get his show going. And he mentioned you. I don't
tapping out an email now. Let me take.
Yeah. I think he said, because it must have been soon after your Was it
Yeah,
2011?
around 2010, 2011. Yeah. But he used to be, me and Terenzo, he lived in LA, had a beautiful home up. He still lives there up in the mountains. And he was our
Yeah.
primary swimming partner every single day in Calabasas.
Uh,
Yeah, very, very, very athletic guy, Rich Ryle. I know he's the vegan thing, and everyone knows he was this endurance endurance running guru. But he was a fantastic swimmer, really, really
yeah.
solid swimmer. Yeah, really good.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, we talked about that a bit on the episode, but I think it was post-episode where we were chatting about when I was picking his brains on how to build a podcast and get more people interested, and he did mention that. So there you go. You have to reach out to him. So thanks, mate.
So you're right where he was. Oh, perfect. Because it's amazing. I love these podcasts. I find them. I've listened to a good 5 or 6 of yours now, and I go for a drive now instead of listening to the radio. I put a podcast on. It's magnificent. I love them.
Yeah, you know what I do? I turn the speed up. I don't know if you do. I find I need to listen to him at about 1.5 times the speed. I'm not saying you have to do that for everybody listening, but I find about 1.5 times the speed. I can take an hour and a half podcast, listen to it in an hour.
Do you sound like a chipmunk, or is it?
No, not at 1.5. And even because I have to when I do all the show notes and timestamps and all of that kind of stuff, I re-listen to all these episodes and then I write them all down, and I often listen to it about 1.5 to 2 times. 2 times it starts to get, you got to really concentrate. It's like what do they say? What do they say? But it is. It's been fascinating for me to learn all of it, to be honest. I can't wait to get it on YouTube and in person. But for now, this is it. Yeah.
Well, let's delve into your career, mate, because we've talked about the podcast. How did you get? I know you're a Northern Beaches boy of Sydney. So anyone who knows Sydney, there's the north and the south, and Benno grew up on the other side of the Harbour Bridge. So you're at the city.
God's country.
Yeah, God's country. They're in lockdown at the moment. The Insular Peninsula, they call it. Yeah, but how did you find a passion for endurance sport? Where did that come from?
You know what? I probably go back to I went to Newington, a school on your side of the bridge, and Newington was big for rugby and rowing. It was one of those traditional schools where that's what you did. And my older brother, people have probably heard me talk about it. He was the rugby player. He ended up playing professional rugby, and he was down the boat shed. He wasn't the biggest guy, but he was rowing. And so I thought, okay, I'll go down and row. And I went down. Oh, here we go. I'm going to be a rower, and they put me in the coxswain seat. For people who don't know, that's the little guy that sits down the back of the boat because he's too small, that steers and basically manages the boat. And I really didn't enjoy that. I was like, oh, this sucks. But what I realized is when the crew would go training, we'd go on these long runs, and I'd often be I'd be a coxswain for a lot of these guys that were 3-4 years older than I was. And I realized I could outrun them all. I was probably 12, 13. And I was like, I started kind of enjoying running. But it was really not until the Nepean Triathlon in 1986. I was 14 and had a couple of mates that said, hey, why don't you come out and do a relay with us at this thing called a triathlon? You're a runner, and we'll do it as a relay. I said, all right. And I think it was an 800-meter swim, a 30K bike, and it was a 14-kilometer run. That was the way it was back then. It was like everything was all over the place. And so we got to the race, and then the guy that was meant to do the swim had an asthma attack and said, Greg, you're going to have to do the swim. Now, I'd never swum in my life. I mean, I'd been in the surf and stuff, but I couldn't swim. Anyway, I did the swim, came out second last out of, I don't know, however many 100 people were in the race, and tagged my mate who went and did the bike. He came back. I think we were still either in last or second last. And then I took off on the run and got through the run. It was a long, long way. I think I took off like it was an 800-meter run and realized 14K is a long way. And did that. And what it was the atmosphere at the finish and the people. And it was like, I love this.
Yeah.
And it was just like, and I was like, I could do the bike. I've done the swim and the run. How hard could the bike be? And so it was really, I think, Wollongong Triathlon in 87. In January, I think I went and got a bike for Christmas, and then did this triathlon and did it miserably. I think I just broke 3 hours for the Olympic distance or whatever it was. But again, loved it. It wasn't about being the best or anything. It was just simply the people and the testing myself and the pushing. And And then it was kind of maybe a couple of years after that, there was Balmoral Triathlon Club started up, and they would do Friday night aquathons and swim races and biathlons, and then the local Sydney ones. I'd go down to Cronulla, and you guys had the Richie Walker Memorial triathlon out there at Kurnell, and there was just all these little events popping up everywhere.
And hackathons, huh? There was the Coke series over at Coogee. Did you do that?
The Coogee one. There was one across Sydney Harbour. Yeah. The Triple M biathlon. Remember that one?
Yeah.
And
fun events. Lots of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So all of those, and I kind of was, for me it was just being around the people and finding something for myself. Because I don't know about you, but I found high school pretty tough at times. You're kind of this insecure kid just trying to find your way a little bit. I was never the most confident. Yeah. And being at a school where it was all about who's the biggest and strongest with rugby and rowing, kind of trying to find your way if you're not into band or whatever else, but you love sports. It's kind of like, well, what do I do? And I was fortunate that triathlon was really starting to boom. And in that late 80s, everything was happening. It was,
then who were the stars winning the triathlons then? Was Welshie around, or had he already really gone to the States? Who was?
Oh no, it was still Welshie, but it was, remember, Stephen Foster. There was what's the other Melbourne guy? Greg.
Tim Bentley.
Yes. Tim Bentley, and there was another Greg guy. I've forgotten his name.
Greg
Stewart. That's it, Greg Stewart. Because I know there was a whole group of Gregs coming through at the same time, and and so I remember that era. It was like everything was neon, fluorescent, and everything was bright, and disc wheels were coming in, and these funny little aero bars called Scott DH bars, or Profile even had their own sort of pram pushing looking aero bars, and clipless pedals, and it felt like every 6 months something new and exciting was coming out, and we'd sneak in. I know you and I've shared stories about this. We'd sneak into the local pubs and sit down the back to watch Sky Sports, to be able to watch the American races. What was it? Chicago, I think, was even on then, and Hilton Head, and the whole Bud Light series.
Miles Stewart going over there racing the Americans, living through the magazines here.
That was it. So you started about the same time, right?
I started 90, so you're a few years in front of me. I sort of discovered it the same way. I remember vividly the first time I knew who you were, but I remember being down at either Maruya or Bateman's Bay, one of those triathlons, and you won the event, and I remember standing at the back, and all the Southwell boys were there, and you got up. I think I said it on our podcast, and you said, "I want to thank all my sponsors," and you took a step back for the microphone because you didn't have any. But everyone back then who won races always had sponsors, Barracuda, or you're like, "I'd like to thank all my sponsors," and you just took a step back and didn't have any. I'm like, I like this guy. It's just a new wave because everyone had a sponsor except the next generation, the young guys. But I remember thinking, that's okay. He's Greg Bennett, huh? Okay, I remember that.
Well, you remember all the young guys coming through. You remember like Loch Vomerhouse, Jason Harper was down in your era, Ben Bright.
Those Ben Brights and Loch Vomerhouses, they were young guys that were making it.
They weren't just making it; they were like taking on Mark Allen on the Gold Coast World Cup. Remember that race?
Totally. So there was this sort of desperation, I think, from my end, and I know, knowing you quite well, we thought we'd missed the boat. We thought we were old.
Big time.
We thought we were old. Ben Bright was winning races, and he was younger than us. I'm like, oh man. Miles Stewart was a world champion at 20.
Yeah, he won the Miles Stewart. Was it 91 world champs on the Gold Coast?
Yeah.
And he won it, and he was basically 6 months older than I was. I was like, what? Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Just how good these guys were. And then for me, it was really like a couple of years later, I was getting through university. I think you were at the same time. And then Australia started, we had the Nike series that was kind of going around. And that was there was a few races around, Victoria and New South Wales. And then there was a big announcement that we're going to have this event. It's going to be much like the Uncle Toby's Surf Ironman series. It's going to be, and then they had this big sponsor, the Bray Brothers from Online Sports, and Tui's Blue, which is for people who don't know, is a big beer company in Australia, Tui's. We're going to sponsor
alcohol-free, low alcohol.
Low alcohol, yeah, low alcohol. And then they said we're going to pick, it's going to be 25 guys, and they're going to pick 15, and they're going to have qualifying spots for 10 others.
Yeah.
And I just remember going, I have to try and get on this series. And 3 qualifying races. I ended up racing okay in all 3. I think I finished second in that little qualifying series, and I made it to this Tui's Blue series at the start of 94. And I will never forget getting on the plane that was taking us all up to the Gold Coast, Sanctuary Cove. And on the plane was Greg Welsh, and Chippy Slater and all these guys that were just, they were the best. They weren't just the best in Australia. They were the best in the world.
Ever.
Yeah. I'm like, I felt like, okay, I am not meant to be here. And you said it in your podcast. How did you put it again? Imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is what I had big time. And then I was rooming with Chippy Slater and Fiery Chippy. He had me all nervous before the races. And I remember these races because they were live television.
Yeah.
And we would get fined if you were late for the briefing. It'd be $200. If you wore the wrong T-shirt, $200. If you, whatever you did, everything was like $200 fines everywhere because you couldn't afford to be late. Everything was like clockwork for live television.
Yeah.
And mate, that was one of the most unbelievable, scary, exciting moments of my life, standing on the pontoon at Sanctuary Cove for the first race of that Tui's Blue series, helicopter overhead, live television, counting down, the Bray brothers nervous as hell. Everybody was nervous, everybody was petrified of what was going on. None of us really knew what we were doing. And away it went. We had 3 sprint races back to back. The Tui's Blue Bike Bowl, which they made this ramp that you had to go around 45 degrees, and it had this lip on it that was, it was like jumping over a footpath or a curb. You had to lift your front wheel up, hook yourself around, come back down. Oh, it was scary as hell.
You were in it. For the fans that got to watch that, it was the first time triathlon in Australia was live television. Yeah. I mean, prime time live on a Sunday afternoon. I remember zooming home like we were. You had one of the uniforms, which you're one of the 25 guns for the fans that were watching it. I remember that day turning on the television channel, watching that race with all the guys having a big barbecue at the house, going, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" There's Benno, there's Brad Bevan. You're primetime TV. It's that single event and that series, as we've talked about a lot, changed the face of triathlon in this country. It was remarkable.
I think it changed triathlon for the world.
Yeah, I do.
I think we look at your Superleague now, which is a lot of what we did in the 90s.
Yeah, totally.
And this made for for an audience. It changed triathlon for the better. For us it was a real launching pad to being professionals right away.
Yeah.
My career didn't start going, I'll be an age grouper for a bit, or I'll be somewhat of a professional. It was like, bang, you're on the world stage. You are live television. You are now got Hungry Jack swap cards, which for Americans, Hungry Jack's is Burger King. We're doing all the background TV video commercials for it. We're going school visits. We're doing, I was a 21, 22-year-old, suddenly just launched into the spotlight. And it was, and thankfully we had guys like Brad Bevan and Greg Welsh, and that took the brunt of it. They were far bigger names than all of us, but the rest of us got dragged along. And man, you look at the amount of us that came out of that program, because that was the first race, if you think Sanctuary Cove, but then we had, I think that first year might have even had 7 events. Yeah. It might have been 5, but I can't remember clearly. And then we had the next year, and you qualified the next year, right?
Yeah.
And I think yourself and Miles Stewart then came in that year, and boy, suddenly the field got more and more competitive.
Every single piece of every triathlon talent, or anyone who had thought they were a talent, after seeing the Tui's Blue, were like, that is my new focus. That's what I want to do. That's all I want to do, is get into that series. And it changed the way young triathletes saw themselves. They saw an opportunity, which was on our own shores, I guess. And I think as you sort of touched on, what that series also did, which you don't really realize, was you got an initiation in how to talk to a camera, how to do an interview, because the Bray boys just grabbed you. You came 5th in a race. Right, we've got Chris McCormack live on telly. You're like 4, 3, 2. You're like, it was an initiation of fire, right? Like you would never have learnt all those skills that became very, very important later in your career that had not been thrust into the spotlight like that. Was remarkable.
And it made us better athletes. If you think back, we were racing full summer seasons because we had the Grand Prix or Formula One, whatever you want to call it. It changed names a few times. But we then had a few national series events. We would then leave Australia and go straight off to do the World Cup series or race for French clubs or whatever we did. And you look back, well, a normal year was 25 races. I mean, that wasn't ridiculous.
Yeah, that was normal.
Yeah, that was normal. And it was a way to pay the rent. I mean, we were very fortunate with that series in Australia. I think I remember in that Tooheys Blues series. I think I finished 6th or 7th in the series, and somebody probably can correct me if I'm wrong. But Tooheys Blue, I finished 6th or 7th, and I remember looking at the bank account and going, "Wow, I think I made $18,000 or something." And I was still at university at the time. I was like, "Wow, this." Yeah. You do get that little, maybe this can be my career. Maybe this can be something I do in the future. And that same year, 94, I qualified for my first World Championships in Wellington, New Zealand, which was the last non-drafting World Championships. And because I'd raced in the Australian, Tooheys Blue Series, going to Wellington, again, I was used to pressure. I was used to helicopters overhead. I was used to cameras. I was used to all of that none of that felt overwhelming. And I think we had almost 100 guys on the start list in Wellington. It was deep water, freezing cold start. And I remember having a pretty good race there and finishing 14th and making $1,000. I was like, okay, maybe this is what I should be doing. I mean, you look back and go, it doesn't sound like a lot, but as a university kid that was working at Sizzler, as you did, it was these little $1,000 checks that came rolling in every now and then gave you that little pat on the back and go, okay.
You let off the bike there. Do you remember? You let off the bike.
No, Spencer got me.
Yeah, exactly.
Spencer outswam me by almost a minute and a half. And then I think we had very similar bike splits. So I got off the bike second, but he was well up the road. And then I remember Brad Bevan running past me.
He was the defending world champion, so it was Spencer.
Yeah, but he was my age. He's our age.
I know.
He was another Miles Stewart. These young guys came on and just went bang.
Yeah.
That was so good.
Totally. Was that when you realised post that event, okay, you had Tooheys Blue and you were top, you were right there in the Tooheys, but it was really a Brad and Greg show that first couple of years. But was it that event in New Zealand, that World Championships, when you realised you had some, you were beyond just good at this, you were actually very talented at triathlon? When did that come? When did you realise you had that sort of strength to be a talent, big talent?
I think it was gradual. There was a number of pats on the back. I think it started with sort of the Balmoral Triathlon Club aquathons, like we talked about, and winning those. And again, that's, in fairness, that's beating up on people that are working full time and everything. But you get these little pats on the back that say this is pretty good. But it was, I think qualifying for that Tooheys Blue Series, I think winning the Richie Walker Memorial Triathlon in front of Mick Moroney, who was kind of Mick Moroney down in Cronulla Shire, was the big gun. And I remember outrunning him there. And these little pats on the back, but then qualifying for my first Australian team to go to Wellington, New Zealand World Champs. I'll never forget, my dad's face when I came in and said, "Dad, I'm representing Australia at the World Champs." And he started crying. And, it was just like, that was
huge.
No one in our family, was representing Australia. No, it was like, what are we talking about? It was a really big moment. And then, so that World Championships was really special for that. And, I didn't get a great preparation. I had university exams right up until the Thursday before, and I was just kind of like, but again, getting 14th, being in the top 10 for much of the race, and I think that was a nice pat. And then it really was, I finished university in 94, and so I was like, okay, 95, let's just go all in. We'll do the series again. We'll be full time, and I did the series again. I don't think I did as well. Oh, maybe I finished 4th that year in that series. It was maybe okay. Then I got injured. Had an ITB injury, which I look back now and it's so treatable, some of these injuries that I look back. But that was scary then, because suddenly I'm making no money again. And you're like, oh, maybe I should be, I should go back and do some more study, or I should, go get a real job or whatever. But fortunately, I got over the injury. I actually came down with kind of a borderline pleurisy or whatever, really a bronchial issue that knocked me on my back for 4 weeks. That got rid of the ITB because I couldn't walk. And then I kind of got going. And then it was really that 96 where things really started to click. I joined a new coach, Brett Sutton, took me under his wing. and that was the world champs in Cleveland.
Yes.
Where I qualified. I didn't think they'd put me on the team. They put me on the team. I was like, incredibly grateful for them putting me on the team, and I finished fourth. I got overtaken by Manzan, Brazilian, right on the final 200 meters. Just lost the podium there. But that was a great race because myself, Simon Lessing, Brad Bevan, and Hamish Carter. No, not Brad. Waldo. Craig Walton. Sorry, not Brad Bevan. Craig Walton. Yeah, the four of us got out of the swim.
Yeah.
I just had one of those starts where I got on Waldo's hip and dragged on his feet and just had a great swim. And then the four of us got away on the bike and we just charged and opened a 55-second gap. And that race in Cleveland was, again, cemented it. Do you know what I mean? It was like a gradual over, for me, about 5 or 6 years. I didn't have a breakthrough race. Like, I think you had a breakthrough race you had Drummondville, right?
Oh, that year, yeah.
You had Drummondville where you won that. It was just like, bang. Was that like how it was for you?
For me, that was it. But as I said when you interviewed me, I was on my end. I had these breakthrough races, but you need some consistency, as you were saying. You'd build it over some time. The breakthrough races, you always had an excuse why you won in your own head. You try and be something. People are like, oh, okay, it was a breakthrough race that you realised you could be something, but you wondered in your own head, your own self-doubts, whether it was a fluke. So you had to sort of constantly prove to yourself that you could do it again. Where, I remember for you. From my side, I always thought, okay, I can probably keep up with Greg Bennett. He was sort of my benchmark. You were my guy that we're sort of going along together. But that Cleveland year, when you were gone, I was like, oh, man, he's gone to the next level. That was sort of my because I was in that group when you four rode away, and we had everyone, mate. We had, Miles Stewart in that group. We had Greg Walsh in the group with us. We had everybody. There was the four of you that disappeared in the distance, and we were swapping big turns. And you had gone. I thought, Benno won't run very good. And then you ran off and finished fourth. And I was like, oh, mate, you're next level because you swam, biked, and ran with the best athletes in the world. And so for me, it's like, Greg Bennett's the next level. I've got to play catch up. You always.
Well, you certainly caught up because then if we shift quickly to 97, it was. I think 97 for both you and I.
Yeah, we both went next level. I think
that was our year. I think because I remember sitting with Trent Chapman down in the AIS in Canberra, and we were doing a little training camp there in January or February of 97. And I remember we were looking at the big screen TV there in the AIS, and Chapo says to me, if either of us ever win a World Cup, we have to buy a big screen TV. And I was like, what a great idea, I thought. And this is when big screen TVs were $10,000 or whatever. And I was like, that's a great idea. Thinking it would never happen. Do you know what I mean? I was like, that seemed like saying, if you go to the moon in 2021, you get to have a big screen TV. It really wasn't on the foreseeable future. Neither of us truly believed it to be possible. We knew we were there or thereabouts, but didn't believe it. And then it was Monaco in 97 where I had that, the breakthrough
again.
Yeah, I got off and you were chasing me, Dimitri Gag. There was a whole plethora of guys, and I'd gone off on my own on the bike and just managed to hold you guys off on the run. Just.
Did you buy the big screen TV?
I know. I do have a big screen TV in our place in Boulder, but it did take me probably another 10 years until I did get it, Chapo. I'm sorry, mate, but I did get it. But that 97 year, I think, we both, we had great consistency. I ended up getting hit by a car. No, I didn't get hit. That was a different crash. Sorry. I had a crash in Germany. Do you remember Flughafen-Hahn, the training camp we had there? Yeah. So for those that don't know, Team Australia had a massive camp in a Flughafen-Hahn in Germany, just outside of Frankfurt. How many of us were there? About 30 Australians in this camp.
Yeah. It was the old Cycling Australia training base. So a lot of the cycling guys used to be there too. Nick Gates, and they used to say, it's Hahn Military Airport, wasn't it? Is that Flughafen-Hahn?
Well, Flughafen means airport, right?
Yeah.
I think Germans. So in Hahn, and it was a great training location. It was a lot of fun. I remember young Courtney Atkinson and Trent Chapman, and then you had
everyone,
a whole bunch, everybody,
all the carnies.
Yeah, that's right.
It was incredible, and we used to swim in that silver pool thing that was like
the tin pool.
It was great, but that was when we sort of that whole group started. The young. I think that was in your career without question, and mine, we as we said earlier, we very much mimicked our progression through the ranks. That was our year, 97s, the 98s, the 99s. We're on point. It was sort of the changing of the guard. We no longer, despite respecting the Greg Welshes and the Brad Bevans, I think at that point we believed it was our time to shine. And, it was a good point in our careers. I think, would you say that was the point where you started to take control of your career, or did that take a little bit more time?
I think it took more time for me. I think when I look back, I think I was, because of my lack of confidence in myself, I often gave my career or my journey over to others, my process over to others, probably more than I should have. I think, I had some great coaches along the way, but it really took missing the Sydney Olympics in 2000 that you and I have both spoke, we've spoken long about, because it really was that 97, 8, 9. We'd done pretty well in the World Series and had thought, that Olympics was ours, but whatever. Like I said earlier, Hamish Carter said it goes deserved to whoever gets it at the end. But so for us, I think we were both very disappointed, bewildered in the sport. And I know both of us sort of contemplated, well, what do we do next? And for me, it was almost what I needed to go, well, you need to take control. You need, the federation have taken away the Olympic spot. You probably could have done better in performing in the qualifying. 100% I could have done better in qualifying. And for that, I've got to take more responsibility. And so during that next sort of Olympic cycle was, okay, what do I need to do to become, to make sure that the selectors aren't even going to have a say? I just need to make it happen. Yeah. And that's where I moved to Canada after Simon Whitfield said, Greg, would you come to Canada and help me prepare for the Olympics? And I was pretty disappointed with Australia, as I mentioned. I said, well, of course, you're a good mate and I need a change. So I went to Victoria, Canada. I started working with his coach, Lance Watson, and Lance was as much a consultant as a coach. So I started to take more control. I wasn't handing over the full coaching to him. That
was the shift from Sutto. So prior to that, it was under the Brett Sutton camp, which was a lot more Brett dictating terms, would you say? Or you just
100%.
Okay.
100%. I mean, Brett's whole thing was, turn up, don't think, and do what I say. And I wanted that for that period of my life, and I learned how to train hard. I learned a lot about myself. But I think in order to go to the next level, I had to take more control and more responsibility of what I was doing, and that's where the shift to Canada and I fell back in love with the sport moving to Canada. It was interesting. I'd lost my passion a little bit. It had become work. And then with the disappointment of not making the Olympics and all the pressure that went with it, it had become kind of, and you kind of said it as, you hate or anger fueled you. And I was a little bit like that. And I didn't operate well that way. And I think when I went to Canada, they were laughing during swim sets and having fun. I was like, this reminds me of, 10 years ago, Balmoral Triathlon Club, where we're all working out, having a laugh and a good time. And I needed that. I needed that escape. And that transitioned me to finally, by sort of 2002 and 2003, winning the World Series those couple of years and starting to get on the podium nearly every single race or winning more World Cups. And I think because I was falling in love with the sport again, and even more so, I was falling in love with a girl. And that was, meeting Laura in 2000. And I think that, I don't know, anybody that's been in love, that energy that you get when you're falling in love with somebody and that connection that you have, for me, helped me become a better man and a better athlete. And that transition to 04 Olympics, making the team, and then coming fourth, I got injured and it wasn't ideal prep. Again, I take full responsibility. I learned a lot during that phase. But even then, I still felt like I still had to take more control and more responsibility and figure out, what can I do that I'm not doing to become the very best in the world? I want to be the best in the world. I didn't feel like I ever was. I felt like I got to touch little bits. Every now and then you get to borrow it for half a second and then, you're crap again. And it was like, how can I get myself to be the very, very best? And it really was that next phase of that sort of 05, 06, where Laura and I together sat down and said, right, what can we do in every single aspect of our life to be better at what we're doing? A quick mini break. I really want to encourage you to do something special for yourself and sign up to Athletic Greens and get a free year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase by visiting athleticgreens.com/Greg. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Greg. Hyperice now have a great holiday sale, $50 off Hypervolt and Hypervolt Plus, $400 off all normal tech packages, 20% off all other Hyperice tech, and the brand new Hypervolt Go is now available for $199. It's smaller and it's more portable. Hyperice.com. That's hyperice.com. HYPERICE.com.
You've come off that fourth in Athens on an amazing. That was an amazing course. A tough. It was a real hard person.
You would have loved it, mate. It was your Olympics too. It was the strong men of the sport loved it. Absolutely.
What was so you came fourth? Was the takeaway? Were you happy with that, or was there a little bit of disappointment? What are you saying? You realised you could potentially win it, and that was the. Is that why you made the changes in 2005 you were talking about before?
I think I struggled, like I said, all the way until about 2006 with confidence.
Even after that fourth place, even after Beijing,
leading into Athens, definitely I didn't believe I could win. There wasn't that. When I learnt to win in 2007, so almost 20 years into racing the sport of triathlon, I was a slow learner. Whereas someone like yourself, Miles Stewart, I'd watch you guys, and you always tended to just, if you knew you wanted it, you would make it happen. And I thought that was just something that you guys just had. I didn't believe it was a learnt skill. And so for me, I had to learn how to win. And I remember going into Athens, I just made the team. I just scraped in. I then had got injured with an Achilles injury, couldn't run. About 8 weeks before the Olympics started to be able to train normally and trained relentlessly. And I actually got to Athens, and my mindset was, don't embarrass yourself.
Wow.
That was how poor my mental strategy was going into Athens. It was simply don't embarrass yourself. And then I got on the swim and biked and I ended up having a reasonable day. But had I had a better mindset, had I gone in, not being arrogant, but just believing in the work and who I was and my ability, I think I definitely could have been mixing up with Hamish and Bevan for the win. But again, you got to be the complete package. And I didn't have that. And I had to learn that and what was missing. And for me, Laura and I now look at it as we go, there's 7 fundamentals that you need to put in place if you want to get the very, very, very best out of yourself. And that's been largely what I ask a lot of my guests on each of the episodes of the podcast is, we go through each of the 7 fundamentals and, and we can touch on that now if you like. Basically, it's, for me, the number one fundamental is your team and your relationships. And we talked about it with your episode, you surround yourself with people that want the best for you, and they're great at what they do, but they truly want the best for you. And you've always had that. I see your friends like with Mick Gilliam and, I just always have seen you have your little entourage with people that are there and they're there for you.
Yep.
And that's empowering, isn't it? It's like
totally.
You need to be. Oh, here's a little side story. So I've talked about team and relationships and the importance of this on this show a bit. My mum, who listens to a lot of the episodes, she went out. So my dad passed away last year, 2019. And so she's on her own. And so she's gone and built her team. And she has her finance. She has her veterinarian. She has her lawyer, her best friends. And she's built this team. And so she said she now has them all come over kind of biannually, twice a year. She'll put a big meal on for them all and calls them her team and surrounds herself with these people that all want the best for her. I'm like,
wow,
that's awesome. And that is just so she can go these, retirement years better than if she was on her own. And I think that's really empowering when you hear that message of building a team and relationships and taking control of your life. That's almost like step one. Find good people, surround yourself with it, and get rid of the deadwood,
Yeah.
And I had, when I look back at my career, obviously my family, my mum and dad, from day one, they said, just chase any opportunity. They never made me feel guilty for chasing triathlon. What are you doing? No, I never had that. I was always go to town. And I always had that even though we were on the road probably 10, 11 months of the year, I could always leave stuff at their house and come back and stay when I wanted to. I always had that.
Yes.
That to me was a huge advantage, to have a home life where I could go home if I had to. Yeah. That was a massive advantage. And then after that, my brothers obviously, but then meeting Laura, as I mentioned, that was probably one of the biggest things. And then you start building your specific team, your chiropractors, had Dr. Alex Keith down here in Florida, would travel with me to all my key races and, work at me at 2 a.m. in the morning before Dallas, the 5th race from 5 in 2007. Just incredible people. Marcus Mejias, Ted Forkham, Duncan Crosby. These guys are all bodywork people, Christine Bell. And I had all of these people around me all the time. And it is amazing, though, the better you get, the bigger your team and the more people want to be a part of it. And, because I'm laughing now because I'm building this podcast. I'm like, I need a team. But nobody wants to be in your team when you're kind of starting out. And I'm kind of like, for you, it was much the same. I mean, you had a small team, but they were with you throughout your whole career, right?
Yeah, since the beginning. Helen McGuckin, she's my running coach since day dot. She came to everything. And
I remember Helen. Yeah, lovely woman.
Michael Gilliam, Susan Kalafner, people that are with me. And as you said, I think the most important thing, they have a unselfish, unwavering belief in you when you don't at times, right?
Absolutely.
They're the glue, and they're the people that pull you out of you can do this. You just need that. As you said, you got pats on the back from the club members. That team pats you on the back and lifts you up when you feel down and just makes you feel whole and gives you, I found it gave me the confidence to be, to the confidence and the backing to be who I wanted to be, and whether I could achieve that or not, a lot of the time they said, yeah, of course you can. And they were there to help facilitate that. And a lot of people from the outside, I think I said on the podcast with you, used to say about when you're building a team, and they used to say about me, Macca only puts people around him that tells him what he needs, tells him how good he is, and it's 100%. Yeah. That's exactly what you do. That's you do. Some people, from an outsider's perspective, it can look at times quite like a cult or semi-narcissistic, but that's the great thing of a team. They believe wholeheartedly in the individual, in the process, and in the direction you're going, in the goal, and they're all in. And that's really important. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it was massive for me come that kind of 06, 07. It was like I've talked about, and one of the talks I do is basically learning how to win, as I mentioned earlier. And, I kind of think before 06, 07, I had a winning rate of around that 8 to 10%, right? So it's not terrible. One out of every 10 races kind of thing. I get to have a little win, but it wasn't a lot. And I think I was looking at yourself and Miles and Brad and Greg Walsh, and you guys were far, far more consistent than that. And I knew something had to change. And for me, that was, I was fortunate with the American series, the Lifetime Fitness triathlon series that Brahma Karate put on, and he put on big money, non-drafting Olympic distance. Yeah. Now that was my bread and butter. That's how I started the sport. That was, for me, I needed the bike time trial to toughen up the legs for the run. And it was suddenly just fell into my lap. And I have tremendous gratitude for my whole career, because the amount of times, like Laura just says, it's just uncanny how the opportunities just kept coming my way. If I think about myself as a 20-year-old and suddenly Tui's Blue Grand Prix starts up, boom, then a few years later, triathlon gets into the Olympics. Boom, I'll focus on World Cups and the Olympic movement. Then, okay, I'm done with the Olympics. Boom, Brahma Karate puts on a Lifetime Fitness triathlon, non-drafting Olympic series. Oh, great, thank you very much. Boom, that finishes. We'll start with the High V triathlon. So my career was, what's that guy's book where he talks about work, talent, and opportunity? Somebody will tell me, but it's a fantastic book. It might come to me in a moment, but basically, I look at my career. Yes, I worked incredibly hard. I have some ability, but boy, I had some opportunities drop my way, and that was the lasting thing on my career. And I know I've got a little sidetracked off. But
you have to pursue those opportunities, Greg, which you did. It's one thing to have opportunities, but you have to pursue them, because that's the most difficult thing. A lot of the time, opportunities you only realize they're an opportunity because you opt to head in that direction.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, I think the second part of it is, so we got team and relationships is sort of number one, but the second big thing for me was really understanding the mind and getting control of my own insecurities and my confidence.
Yeah.
Because I knew that was a weakness, and that, I'm all about playing to strengths, but sometimes you really got to work on your weaknesses. And
what in particular did you see as a weakness in your arsenal? Interesting, because from an outsider's perspective, I didn't think you had one. That's the irony as a
yeah, but I don't know that I believed I had a weapon to break up the race. And that weapon being, I had the weapon, but I didn't believe I had it. And that weapon was basically toughen up a race. And we're much the same as athletes, you and I. We both hope that our swim will be there, first pack.
Yeah.
Then we know we can toughen up the bike. Either we get away on our own, or we can just at least harden it up. And then we know we can run on fatigued legs and potentially run a 30-minute type 10K, 31-minute 10K for the win. That's a pure gold race for both you and I. I think the learning to win, the visualizing comes a year out from a certain race. It comes, and that visualizing then affects the physical. And that what you think directly affects your physiology, I 100% believe in. I've done a lot of research on it, especially this year. And so I spent a lot of time visualizing, both on massage tables, just thinking about it, but then also out specifically physically when I was out running. I became very, very good at putting a commentator in my head.
Yeah.
If I'm doing 10 by 1K efforts or 3-minute efforts, it's like in warm-up, I'd break it up, have all the players in my head. There's Chris McCormack, Simon Whitfield, Hamish Carter, whoever it is, right? And always Peter Robinson, because he was always doing sprints and surges and having a bit of fun. But I got so good at it, repetitive, that it actually affected the physical training I was getting. So I got used to putting in big surges at, say, on the third effort, and then on the sixth effort. And then, I got used to changing pace at high speed. And that was because I was always racing somebody in my head.
Yeah.
And then on the bike, that happened as well. And it got to the point I got very excited getting to races about just trying to put the race together that I'd already visualized. And it was incredible when it happened. When you actually visualized a race and it actually happens exactly. I mean, that for me was the breakthrough I needed. And that really happened in that 2006 kind of window where I just started going. And because then confidence came with it.
Gotcha.
Confidence came with it, where I started going, okay, I think I know how to do this now. That didn't mean I still didn't have self-doubt creeping in, all the time. I think that self-doubt and anxiety is always there, and it's almost a fuel to go out the door and train harder.
Yeah.
But it definitely helped. And, and then I started, things like just reducing, the negativity around me, reducing the noise, only surrounding myself with positive people. Affirmations. I used a lot of word affirmations. But again, some people, I've had on the show, and I asked Javier Gomez, do you visualize or use word affirmations? He's like, no, I don't do any of that. And then 15 minutes later in the conversation, he goes, yeah, when I visualize that, la, 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 la. And it's like, oh, so I'm like, you do visualize. But it comes more natural to some people. Whereas for me, I had to actually, it was planned. I had to force it. And then I became better and better at it. And that was huge for me.
Did success feed that even more? So the more success.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? It's like you get that little pat, and then you kind of, I think by sort of in mid 30s, I think you coined it, the golden 30s.
Yeah. And
for me, that kind of 32 to 39 were really my golden years, because it was like now I started to win, 1 in 2, 1 in 3 races. It has started to become, I'm comfortable leading. Yeah. It's still stressful leading. You're getting chased down and everything else. But because I've always been the chaser, I know the mindset of a chaser too. So then when you're leading, you can kind of be comfortable going, yeah, he's doubting himself whether he can catch me. Yeah. All I got to do is get around this corner and sprint one more time, and then he'll give up. Yeah. You kind of know the attitude of somebody chasing. So that, it definitely did help fuel it. And I think also understanding that physically I was getting very, very strong. Like I knew I could swim front pack. I knew I could ride that 52 to 53 minute bike, and I knew I could run, a low 30 10K off the bike. And it was funny in 2007 when Brahm put up if you win the 5 from 5, and on the Hunter Kemper episode, I kind of stepped everybody through the the 5 from 5 races. But none of us believed a guy could do it. We all potentially thought Emma Snowsill would do it.
Yeah.
Until she got beaten on the first race by Fernandez.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh. And for me, I was so heavily focused on the first race in Minneapolis because it was actually the last race of the 06 series as well, where I was up against Craig Alexander to win that series. And,
okay, I didn't know that was the first race of the...
Yeah. So Minneapolis 07 was the last race of the 06 series. So the 06 went New York, LA, Chicago, and then finished with Minneapolis. So for 10 months before, I was so focused on winning Minneapolis, which I hadn't done before. Minneapolis wasn't really a course that suited me. But I was so heavily, and I knew that to win, if I could break, if I could just sprint the run, then, I could win it. And fortunately for me, I did win it. But then I had to go to New York the next week. New York had been a good race for me and always was because it had the hills on the bike and the power to weight ratio on the bike and the run really suited me. So New York, I then got that win. But then I had to race Chicago as the third race, which Craig Walton had won a bunch of times. I think, have you won Chicago?
Yeah.
Did you win it?
I won in 2001.
Yeah. So all you guys had won it. Even Crowe had won it. And I'd never won Chicago again. It was a bit like my Minneapolis. I'd done it so many times, but never won it. And Craig Walton was just on fire in 07.
That was built for him, that course.
Oh, it was so built for him. It was just so powerful, fast. And anyway, I did end up catching him and winning on that one. And when I beat him in Chicago, I was like, maybe, but the amount of stress I started to feel though in that 07, can Greg win all 5, started kicking in. But again, I was 07, I was 32. I was more adept at handling the big time stress. But yeah, actually, in saying that, doesn't it funny, when you look at Alistair Brownlee with the kind of stress he must have had at London Olympics in 2012. How old was he? He was only 24 or something.
But as we said earlier, they were just freaks. We spent most of our 20s trying to find out that we're good. They just knew that from the beginning. I
know, but they still worked at it. Even he said,
Totally. No, agreed.
I mean, they're just remarkable, those two. Sorry, yeah. Where was I? Anyway, yeah. So then I went on to do LA, and LA triathlon in 07 took me through every emotion I ever thought I could have. I went there. I'd won in 06, so I thought, I felt pretty good about it. Waldo ended up getting. I got off. That's right. I got into T2 with Nicole Hackett's brother, Steve Hackett.
And
I think who was behind us? I think Lessing might have been there, but he might have been injured or whatever. But then I got off the bike and I heard from my sponsor. I said, "How far?" He said, 3.5 minutes.
Oh,
it's like I was actually, oh no. And then I had this moment where I was like, good, it's over. I've won the series, but good, the pressure to win all 5 is over. I had this moment. And then I snapped myself out of it, literally, it must have been like 1 second, and just said, why not sprint and find out? And I just remember sprinting that run, absolutely one of the greatest runs of my life, hands down. Because you had to run up to the Disney Center from the Staples Center. And this run, I don't know the percentages, I said it was a 15% hill. People can probably tell me downtown LA. And running up it, but then letting myself go on the downhill, just going, if I fall on my face, I fall, but I have to go. Just arms are flailing, just dropping down this hill.
Downhill better. I'll give you that. Best downhill runner in triathlon.
That was the one gift I did get. And then finally I caught Waldo with about 200 meters to go, and I was like, great, I got it. And then I went to go around him, and he sprinted.
Oh, no.
I was like, no. And fortunately, I ended up getting him by a few seconds at the end, and then it was to Dallas, and Dallas was funny. I didn't know how to approach it. I got injured. I went to Beijing to watch Laura qualify for the Olympics. She qualified. We actually had a big party in Beijing, and after the flight home, I got injured. My Achilles, I couldn't run for the 5 weeks leading into the final race in Dallas, and didn't tell a soul. Flew down to see my chiropractor, Alex Keith, down here in Florida. He took me to the shooting range, believe it or not, and I was so scared of shooting a gun, I was petrified that it was actually almost the release I needed. It was like this, psychologist could probably tell you more than I, but it was like, it really was more than just, I was sweating holding these big guns and shooting them in this firing range. But then I went back to Boulder and just was so much calmer about the whole thing. Turned up to Dallas, like I said earlier, Alex Keith and Camille Reagan, another chiropractor, both came to the room at 2 a.m. and started working on my body till 4. And then I went down to the race. I didn't study the race at all, that one. I actually let it go. But then driving down to the start with everybody on the bus, I realized there was like a 2-kilometer descent down to the lake. And I just said to myself, I can win this. Because I knew with 2-kilometer climb coming out of the water, I knew I could bridge up to Waldo and some of these guys earlier on the bike than expected. And that's what happened. And then I managed to fake the run to some degree, ran the first 5K with everything I had and then blew to pieces, but held on. And so that was a really incredible year. But what was mostly incredible about that wasn't the money. It was just simply having a year.
Yes.
Having a year that for 20 years previous I'd been striving for, where physically, mentally, emotionally, and the results, everything turned up. And Laura had a year too. She won High V and she qualified for the Olympics. So 2007, we look back in our lives and we go, we weren't every year. We weren't Javier Gomez winning everything, but we did have 2007. Yeah. And that was it. I think I won Dallas the same day you won your first Kona, right?
Yeah, it was. Yes.
Yeah, we both had breakthroughs at the same time.
Far out.
I know. I mean,
it's funny you said that was your big year, because I love doing this conversation, because I see that was an amazing year. But I wasn't around to see all those other races. So for me, hearing the whole stories about Los Angeles and Dallas is remarkable, because I only read about them and just Benno won the $500,000. Wow, bastard, lucky bugger. But
they didn't have much television or online presence.
It's ironic that you think that was your year, because I think your 99 year was amazing when you won Sydney World Cup. And I just watching the running, following the ITU circuit from afar, and then watching the runner you became a runner, mate. Like I used to sit there going, man, and that whole 06, 07, 05, 06, 07 period, man, you were the best runner. On your day, you could outrun anyone, which was incredible. Like like you said, you were a big biker that needed a good solid bike, but you always delivered a big run off a big bike. You became a guy that didn't need the big bike. If it was there, I'll take it and I'll still outrun you. And if it's not there, I'll take that as well and I'll still outrun you. Like that.
Thanks, mate.
You were that period of your life. You got lean. You used to be as younger. You were a lot bigger, a lot more stronger looking athlete. You became leaned down. You were very weight conscious. You had that runner mentality. And geez, the way you ran, like you said, you surged, you attacked, you could do anything. That was take away from afar, and I was on the receiving end many times of that run power. But the takeaway from afar was I was like, wow, Benno's is the gold standard of running now in the sport.
Thanks, mate. You're blowing smoke up me, but I appreciate it.
At that period in your life,
I had a good period there, and a lot of it came down to us, like I said, taking control of the program. I studied. When Laura and I decided to go on our own in 05, 06, I just started studying the greats of old. We realized science has its place in the new age, but Arthur Lydiard became my go-to. So Arthur Lydiard from New Zealand, I think probably the greatest running coach of all time, and he coached, the Finns. Peter Snell, and then he went and helped the Finns do all their amazing stuff. And anyway, I started really, really doing a lot of Lydiard work, and Lydiard was a big believer in doing it. The way I would coin it is doing your easy work at a best easy pace. So easy doesn't mean slow. And my staple, even during the middle of the year, races everywhere, was a 32-kilometer or a 20-mile run every Tuesday. If I raced on the weekend, I'd move it to a Thursday. But basically, I did that every week for years. And that pace would just get lower and lower. And as the years went on, it got faster and faster. I would start the year sort of in 06. It might be start the year at 4:30K pace. What's that? Just under 8-minute mile type pace. And then throughout the year, I'd get it down to, 6-minute mile pace for the 20 miles. As the years went on, by the time I was training with Javier Gomez in sort of 2010, and we were in Noosa, Australia in March, April, Now we're talking, and this is the best. I've been doing it for years. He could turn up and just join me pretty much right away. But we were running that sort of 330 to 340K pace for our long easy range run. So when it got to the point of running a 10K flat out, I was never scared. I knew I could sprint a 10K and not blow up. But that's the kind of work that I was doing that got me to that. My limiting factor wasn't endurance or strength. It was simply how fast can my legs turn over, and that's always what I wanted to do. I kind of was like, if you can run 1K in a 245 to 250, then you should be able to run 10K in a 250 to 255, and that was it. I started doing running races. I was, doing 29 sort of 30, which is now slow, by the way. When we look at this generation that are running right now, and nearly every guy I've had on the podcast from this latest generation have broken 14 minutes for 5K.
Yeah, got 13s in front of their 5K time.
13, 40s, 30. I mean, they're not just breaking it; they're smashing it.
Yes,
and that I'm just blown. And they're not just doing that. I mean, Vincent Lewis, he's leading the swim out. This guy's holding 102s and 105s for the swim. Then at the end of the race, he's dropping a sub 14-minute 5K. It just blows my mind. I am so appreciative of the
talent,
time, and the era we had. And I think I mentioned it once. I feel like we all shared the wins pretty well.
Yeah.
Like you, me, Hamish, Miles, Greg Welsh, Brad Bevan, Simon Whitfield, the list goes on, Andrew Johns. Everybody got a little taste.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Brownlee and Gomez has come along, and we almost have a 10-year window where it's just those three winning races. And now we're starting to see some new faces pop up in this last couple of years. Yeah. It's extraordinary. It really is.
And the depth, as you said, the talent that's coming up. Like, you think I thought the Brownlees and Gomez was the best we're going to see. And then you see the next wave, the Vincent Louis. Oh. You're like, how can it keep going? What are we going to see, 12s in front of their 5K times? It's like, far out.
I just had Gustav Eden on.
Yeah.
And I've had Christian Blumenfeld, so the Norwegian clan that are just taking the world by storm. And now these guys are approaching the sport with their coach, Arild. I can't remember his family name, his coaches, but they get scientifically tested every 6 weeks. And they're in the lab, swim, bike, run, swim on a Friday, bike on a Saturday, run on a Sunday, in the lab, testing. Gustav told me that his VO2 max now is 92.
Far out.
92. Like, I didn't get tested much in my career. I got tested once down in Canberra at 78. And because there's a bit of altitude, I guess we're allowed to bump that up a little bit. I don't know. But 92, I was like, I said, how much can you fake, you get tested so many times. How much can you fake the numbers? Like, can you work the machine? He said, actually, we can do that, but the tester can cease. He said, all you got to do is hold your breath for 15 seconds. I'm like, well, hold your breath for 15 seconds while you're doing a VO2 max workout. Doesn't sound very easy either. But anyway, that's, why you watch a race like we just saw these last few weeks ago, the PTO championship in Daytona, where he kind of made it look like a jog. It's like, well, that's your next generation. They're going to be retiring the next group. Yeah. I've said on this show how Brownlees and Gomez retired many of us. You remember our final races? Remember you were going to make a comeback for 2012 Olympics in Kitzbühel? We both went to Kitzbühel.
Yeah. I got lapped.
And I was going to also try and go to 2012 Olympics as well. And I'd been doing short course. And I remember swapping turns with Brownlee, and he was Alistair. He was a young punk, and he was abusing me, so I was abusing him back. And then he still broke away from me at the end, and then he did the fastest run, went like a 29-minute. And I came back to the hotel room, and I said to Laura, I think I'm going to go back to the States and do non-drafting. And
it was remarkable. That was, remarkable.
Absolutely. I mean, and then he goes to tell me in his episode, that he was studying a master's in finance as he was preparing for the London Olympic Games.
Wow.
I was like, God.
He's a special athlete because, as you touched on when you're talking about the fundamentals to high performance, you're talking about team. He's got a great team around him. I think his brother and his family fill a big void there, and He had his agents and his coach. But his mental strategies, I've never seen a guy so, he gets himself to a point through his training that his belief in himself is unwavering. And it must be when you can deliver what you can deliver in training, but it's unwavering. And it's remarkable. At times that when you speak to him as a friend, it comes off hey man, that's a bit not arrogant, but like, you really think you can do that? Like, remember, you've got Jan Frodeno, all these other, I've got them. But it's remarkable to see that talent and mindset combined. That's why you get a champion such as Alistair Brownlee.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's remarkable.
I mean, he's been all in since he was 8. Like, this is what he wanted. Like, and Johnny put it great when I said, do you ever feel like you're in the, a little bit in the shadow, or, feel like, he said, Greg, without him, basically, I wouldn't have a career. Everything I have is because of what Alistair has done. I want the best for him, and it's such a great relationship. It really is they both really think highly of each other, and Alistair, definitely the older brother, is tough on his younger brother, Johnny, but it's amazing how they've dragged each other up to the top of the world. But incredible. I'll touch on the other, we've gone through 2, but I'll just quickly touch on the other 5 fundamentals. I believe in general health, which, in terms of staying healthy throughout the year as an athlete is incredibly important. But these days I'm far more aware of it now for longevity and wanting to be around for my kids than I was probably as an athlete. I think as an athlete, you felt like you were bulletproof, but now I tend to, I have a bit more of the supplement type of things. I have my continual G in the morning, my vitamin C and my vitamin D, and then athletic greens later in the day and my multivitamins and all of that kind of stuff. I don't know about you, but I'm starting to be far more aware of supplementing. That's probably more to do with Laura got me onto things more than me, but I just do what I'm told. But now and through this show and talking to everybody, I'm kind of learnt a lot. Hot cold therapy, started doing a fair bit of that.
Yeah.
And I just got for Christmas, this Shakti mat that do you know Dr. Dan Plews?
He trains Toronto. Yeah. He was in Singapore for years, Dan.
Yeah, lovely guy. And he said, Greg, get this Shakti mat. It'll help you relax before bed. So I just got that for Christmas. And that was all. I've been sleeping so well since doing that. Yeah, give it a go.
How do you spell it?
It's SHATKI. Mat. It's basically like lying on a bed of nails. I don't know if you could handle it because you hated all those needles. Remember drug testing? You'd always be free.
I hate needles. Full stop.
Yeah, I know. So that's general health, and then body work and biomechanics. Well, that became, for me, as we've said, our team of people just keeping us moving. I was seeing Marcus Mahias every afternoon there towards the end, and chiropractors once a week.
Chiro and physio. How much of that is actual treatment versus, when you build a team? Where do you relate the massage side? Do you consider that a treatment, or is that more a recovery thing and you have your physios and chiros?
I do both. So the massage, it really would be to flush the legs out, mostly on bike days so I could be ready for run days. I didn't like massages a lot on run days. I felt like my body was too tight and it was too painful to get a massage on a hard run day. Whereas a bike day, it was just full of lactic acid. And most bike days got a massage. Chiropractic work usually just once a week, depending on the chiropractor I was working with. They usually had a different kind of skill set. And if I felt like I needed an adjustment, you start to know your body pretty well. I started to grasp in my own body. I still do, which is like, scraping, using all the different scraping tools. And then towards the end, definitely using a friend of ours, Christine Bell, Australian girl from Brisbane who lives in Boulder, and did dry needling. And I found the dry needling, which you would hate, but you get used to it. And boy, that was incredible how well that worked. And these days I just use, they sponsor the show, but I use them anyways. The HyperIce stuff like the HyperVolt, some of those massage tools. And,
Yep.
Yeah, I use all of that stuff because I'm still trying to be a little bit fit these days. I'm just working out 45 minutes a day. And one day is either heavy weights or it's doing running the next day. Although at Christmas, the day before Christmas Eve, there was a little 5K run around the community that we're in. And I tell you what, it's hard to run at 180 pounds, 79 kilos. I'd like to say it's all muscle, but it's probably not. And I ran an 18:30, which I It was brutal.
Yeah.
And you think about 18:30, that's what I used to do for my long easy run on a Tuesday, for 20 miles, for 32K, and I can't even do that. So I think I'm going to back off the heavy weights a little bit just to get my running back. Remember you said in your episode you were getting ready for a marathon. Obviously, it all got cancelled. Are you still looking at getting your running going, or what's your training like now?
Now I just I do this F45 with Emma. So
yeah, that just came over here. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. We do that every morning, which is 45 minutes. It's quite easy. And then I run probably 3 times a week, just very, very light. I find running beats me up a little bit more, but I've always been that. I used to race at that 78, 79 kilos that you're talking. But
you did not. You went 78, 79, were you?
Always. Yeah. I won Kona. The lightest I ever won at Kona was 177 pounds. That was 2007. Even everyone thinks 2010 I was lighter. I actually was lighter in 2007.
Well, you got a strong backside, don't you? You've got pretty big legs.
I'm still all bumming. And now I'm older. I'm bum, legs, and gut. I've got a. That's why F45 at the gym works. It's the curse of Polynesian blood.
Yeah, I was going to say you do have that strong Polynesian blood.
Yeah.
You are built like a rugby player, a bit like you and I both could have been a decent rugby. If you were remember we used to even laugh about, I think in the 90s, if you were to build a first 15 rugby team out of the triathletes, who would you pick? I think we had Andrew Johns in the second row, and I can't remember.
Waldo we're going to start. Waldo
would be there for sure. Yeah. We had Chris Hill as our little hooker, which is a term for rugby, people that don't understand. It's a position in rugby. Yeah, that's awesome. I know. You and I think we would have been in the breakaways, fly halves.
Yeah, totally.
Probably.
Well, that was why I was saying before, when I saw you become, because you were always a rugby looking, not quite rugby looking, definitely a small rugby player, but you were always a bigger triathlete. And when those days when you built that run, doing those 20-mile runs and getting that consistency, I sort of attributed a lot of it because you shifted to Boulder at that point as well. You went to altitude.
Yeah.
So
the altitude helped.
Yeah, but you really got lean. You really took on that runner's physique and you were able to maintain that bike strength and not lose that swimming consistency, which is the balance we all try and find in triathlon. When you fix one thing, you tend to trade off. But
everything, it's frustrating, isn't it? Yeah. I remember before 2011, High V, and they made High V had always been draft legal. It was a World Cup, and then they made it non-drafting, and I got so excited about that. And I remember studying the course firstly, and I was like, "Hang on, there's it's 4 laps of 22 corners a lap," and I was like, "Well, hang on, that's 88 corners." And Shimano had just come out with their electronic gearing, and I know I was with another company that wouldn't prepare to sponsor me earlier in the year, but they sent me some product. And so I was like, okay, I need to go buy the electronic shifting. So I bought the electronic shifting for my bike. So I would have the gears next to my brake hoods and in my aero position, which was new at the time. And I need to improve my bike cornering. If I can save half a second a corner over 88 corners, that's 44 free seconds. So I practiced so hard on the cornering. Anyway, got off the bike. Ben Collins had got a little gap on me, but I had sort of 50 seconds on the chasers and managed to hold off in High V. My point is with that story is leading into High V, you mentioned the altitude training we were doing with Boulder. Well, I actually got an altitude tent as well.
Oh, wow.
7. And so what I would do is, and I only did this towards the end of my career, and I'd hop in the altitude tent when I was already really fit. So I'd hop in usually around that end of July, and I would sleep at 12,000 feet in the tent, then be training at that 5,500 to 6,000 feet in Boulder. And that was just an extra stress layer that I would add on top before a key race like a High V at the end of the year. And it was amazing how fit you could get. I mean, to the point it was borderline super fit or breaking down, right? So it really was a balance. And I know for Laura, she ended up not being able to, she would do maybe 3 nights in and 2 nights out kind of thing. But
wow,
it was amazing adding the altitude tent with the altitude of Boulder.
Did you do most of your training in Boulder down at the bottom of the mountains, or did you get up in the mountains much? Or so you always 5.5?
No, I did a fair bit up. I did more up once all the short course racing disappeared and I started to do a few 70.3s and Ironman, and I did more, some of the great runs up high. There's Switzerland Trail, there's Rollinsville, which is a great trail. I love Rollinsville, did that one a bunch. But I always trained too hard for Ironman. And what I mean by that, I trained
Too far.
my paces for short course. Yeah, I was always too fast. I remember Rinny telling me, Greg, you're running too fast. I'm like, whatever, I can run this all day. And then I realized, it has something to do with fat metabolizing and all sorts of other things that I never had thought about that you guys had been learning, over the years. And so a lot of my training, the peak to peak highway and stuff in Boulder, I really enjoyed doing that towards my end of my career. But my whole short course career, I never really left Boulder County, hardly.
Okay.
My bike would be a time trial every Saturday morning from Lyons up to Ward, up the St. Vrain Canyon, 36 kilometers. And I would time trial it every Saturday. And it would basically be, 36 kilometers, about 4,000 feet of climbing. And I knew if I could time trial that well, I got it down to, I think my record on that was about an hour 12, but generally it was about an hour 18. So it depended if you had a tailwind, to be honest. But I learned to ride that really hard, and that transferred really well to time trialing in the races. So
were you doing track sessions a lot in Boulder?
Mate, I didn't. After I left Brett Sutton in '99, I never went on the track again.
Good. That's good to know.
I never went on the track, and I never went on the treadmill again. All of my training went to fartlek, change of speed type work on trails. I just would find trails everywhere. I like to, that's what fartlek means, playing with speed, as the Swedes would put it. I learnt to play, and that also helped me with my visualizing. The track, I did a little bit of track with Simon Whitfield in Victoria. And after he walloped me a fair bit on the track, I was like, I don't need to do that. So I never went back to the track. It was basically my 3 key run workouts was a long run, which was number one.
Yep.
That was always number one. A threshold run, which should be anywhere between that 3 and 7 minute type efforts, and a 2-to-1 ratio. So 3 minute effort, 90-second recovery, or 5 minute, 2.5, whatever. And that was usually about race volume of work, so around that 30 to 35 minutes of work.
And then the effort side of things was the effort.
Yeah, the effort was always worth 30 to 35 minutes worth of effort.
Yep.
And so the recovery was half of that. And then a speed workout on a Thursday, which generally was 1 minuters. But I would often do too many of those. I was always about the volume. I'd do maybe 20 by 1 minute efforts, and with 1 minute recovery. So speed was always 1-to-1 recovery, and that's it. It was a basic template, and then run every day, and sometimes twice. And I kept my running volume over 100K to 120K a week for probably about 7-8 years. Don't get me wrong, there were weeks where it didn't, but that was always the goal, get over 100K a week. And I struggled. I got a few injuries along the way and overdid it, of course. But and that's where I think having a coach that knows you really well and knows when to pull you back would have been a good thing.
Yeah.
I think I still overdid it even when I was 35, 36, 37. In fact, I always had niggles. And I remember before the 2011 High V championship race, and I remember running the week before and going, nothing's hurting. Nothing's hurting. I was so excited. There was nothing hurting. My foot was hitting the ground. There wasn't any Achilles or knee or hip. I was like, wow. And that was always a first. I always had these niggling injuries all the time. But anyway, that's part of it. But I just want to quickly, and the final bits to the 7 fundamentals would be nutrition, sleep and recovery, and then as we talked about, physical training. And that once Laura and I really started really doing the most that we could on those things, that's when life started to happen for us. And, that's why now, talking to guests and sharing our kind of what worked for us has been so much fun this year, with the show.
Huge, mate. Huge year.
Who do you think I should have on the show?
Sally Fitzgibbon.
I've reached out to her after I saw you doing photos with her. If you could put in a word for her, I'd love to have her on the show. I'm a super fan of hers.
Yeah, she's got amazing running history. She's it's an incredible story. I remember seeing Sal as a kid. She used to run with a couple of the young. Oh, this is how old we are. With a couple of my friends' kids, right? My older group of friends, not our age, but my older group of kids. So I don't know if you remember Greg Hoare and His son's a very, very good runner at the moment. They're trying to get him into triathlon. Oliver.
Oh, brilliant.
Oliver. And but yeah, she was I think I'm going to say I probably got it wrong, Sally. So if you're listening, and she was the Australian 1500 meter champion at school through school. She was going to go on either direction, surfing or athletics, and she picked the right one. I think she's a fantastic surfer. But yeah,
she's a good chance for Olympic gold, and when it happens now,
she'd be
fantastic. I'd love to get her on, mate. If you, I did write her. It's not very good when you write people on direct message on Instagram, but I did that the other week. Actually, I had her on mind for quite a while, and then I saw you doing a Breitling day with her, and I was like, oh. That's right. Yeah, I really do want to get her on the show. So, mate, anything you can do to have, I'd love to do that. Yeah. Who else do you think?
Who else do I like? Who else do I know?
What other Aussies am I missing? There's so many great Aussies that are taking on the world that I'd love to,
there's some amazing stories of. There's a girl I know, Orla Walsh, who's an Irish cyclist, who has an incredible story because she's going to make the Olympic team, but 4 years ago she was a party girl. She found cycling to get out of the party scene, and she's unbelievable story. And she tells the story of the similarities between hard training and wrecking yourself in a nightclub, and the same sort of damages you can do, except the training, the athlete side of things is it's a much healthier lifestyle, and she's so glad she found it, but she found it by fluke. And
brilliant. How do you spell her name? Orla?
Orla, Orla, Walsh, WALSH. She's there on Instagram. She's hundreds of thousands of followers, but she's now the Irish track champion on the bike, the Irish sprint champion. She's incredible. That's awesome. I just met her by chance in Mallorca. I was chatting. I'm like, how did you find out you had it? She's like, I didn't. I just started riding to work, trying to get it active, and then started doing some bike races locally, and was just sticking. And a guy said, "You're a pretty good bike rider." She's like, "Me?" It's some incredible stories of athletes like that have got amazing.
That's what I love.
Yeah, there's a young Australian boxer called Skye Nicholson. She's Commonwealth Games gold medalist for boxing, and she's like, she was a model, and you're like, how is the contrast of being a boxer? And she's like, yeah, look, I grew up with brothers, and we boxed, and now she said she could win an Olympic gold medal for Australia. She's one of the favourites to win the Olympics. Like, there's some amazing athletes like that, Greg, that have incredible stories that you see it on social media or you hear about them, but it'd be fantastic guests.
Yeah, so this is the whole thing. Like, when everybody's like, oh, you've already done all the, I'm like, man, there's just so many more people out there doing incredible things. There's high performers all around the world. And, I did enjoy the episode with Dan McPherson, a friend of both of ours, entertainer in the Hollywood. And I was fascinated how they deal with rejection, and the mindset that they have to have, the belief in themselves and the confidence that they all have. But also his ability to then ground himself after being in a role for so long. So I'd like to get some of those, more entertainers on, because I think it's fascinating, their world, because it's one that I have no clue about too. So you're always just going, oh, wow.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. For sure.
Mate, this has been brilliant. Chris, thanks for coming on, Macca.
It's nice to have a chat. It's good to catch up.
Yeah. It's basically, it feels like that sometimes, doesn't it? You just chat for a couple of hours and like, oh yeah, we'll record it. There we go.
Wonderful. Well, I was nervous, doing this with you. I was a little.
No, you did fantastic. I really appreciate it, and I'll definitely make sure people realize that this podcast this episode is primarily about me. So if you don't want to know about me, just don't listen to it. You don't need to be saying, gee, Greg Rabbit's on about himself a lot. Well, the whole point was
about Greg.
Yeah. Mate, thanks again for coming on, especially during this busy time of year. I know you got kids and family and everybody there, so it's just been wonderful to have you. And, I know I've rabbited on about myself a lot, but I really appreciate it. So thanks, mate.
Absolute pleasure. Too easy.
Yeah. All right, everybody else, thanks for listening to me rabbit on. You can go to bennettendurance.com /podcast, actually /media, for the show notes, timestamps, coupon codes, and links. And thanks again, Chris.
Thanks a lot for listening to Be With Champions. If you've enjoyed the show, your support would truly be appreciated. You can visit the Be With Champions Patreon page, or you can subscribe with your podcast app of choice. Don't miss the next episode, so subscribe and be notified. For show notes, if you want to know more, please visit bennettendurance.com. I'm Phil Liggett, and on behalf of Greg Bennett, here's to the next time, and I hope you will join Greg again very soon.